Welcome to the Silverlake Priestess Podcast. I'm Jaime Black, and I'm here today with my friend Rich Ferguson, and I'm really excited to have you here. We're gonna have a bunch of cool conversations about things. Rich is a poet, and he's got some pieces to share with us, and just welcome everyone. If this is your first time here, this is the Silverlake Priestess Podcast. We have conversations with artists and musicians and psychics and mediums and witches and priestesses and all the spiritual folk. And we talk about our spirituality, and we talk about our spiritual practice. We talk about our artistic channeling as part of our spiritual practice. And so I like to bring on interesting people here to have, fun conversations about life and the process. And so welcome, Rich.
Thank you, Jamie. It's great to reconnect. It's been a while. And, as you know, I've been a fan of you and your music for some years now. So it's great to see you. And, I look forward to the day when we can actually, I can play drums for you again at a show or whatever.
I know, we're having that experience with so many people where we haven't seen each other because of this past year, right? So many of us just haven't seen each other because we also are used to seeing each other out in public places. So, there's a couple places that we ran into each other like all at the same time. So I don't really know what happened with first, but Rich and I were both practicing yoga at the same yoga studio. We also were doing some voice work at the same, vocal coach studio. There was a bunch of us that were kind of in there around that time. And I had started playing music for yoga classes at Yoga Works, which is a place that I did, a bunch of yoga teacher training. And, it's funny how everything always leads me back to music. It's like I did all of this training and it was awesome for my practice, and I got to practice teaching yoga. That wasn't really my passion. Practicing yoga is my passion. But anyway, what ended up happening like right after all that teacher training was that I started playing live for yoga classes. And it was really cool because of all the knowledge I had about like how to like build up your class. And I always knew where the teacher would be going so I could guide the music. And I don't know if I was maybe in James Morrison's class and you were playing and then I thought to have you play with me. I don't know how it worked out, but we ended up playing together. And for any of you that were there during the classes, like you remember, it's just such an amazing experience to do yoga with live music. But one of the key elements to that is the drums, is the drum beat. So you can have all these cool instruments playing and everything. Like I would bring all this witchy music too, but when you're practicing, it is like the drum beat that just makes this experience. I mean, when you're in class and you're doing some kind of like Warrior 2 or Warrior 1 and you're holding it and it's just like painful and you're breathing and there's like 60 other people in the room and everybody's sweating and the drums are going. It's like you feel like you're out in nature. You feel like you're like out in the desert or in the jungle or, you feel like you're with the elements because of this drum.
Yeah. I think one of the cool things about the drums in that sort of environment, and you touched upon one thing earlier. I mean, it's really cool to hear, harmonium and all these other types of perhaps airier, more ethereal sort of instruments, but I think the drums just, complement the heartbeat and also allow more sort of a rooting. And when you were talking about holding those poses, I think the drums are a really good one. They're very tribal, so it helps to, call forth the energy that you need in some of those really crazy poses. But I think it's also really rooting when you have to hold some of those poses for periods of time. The drums kind of help to hold you in that place where you're locked in those poses, sweating or whatever. And it also has a trance-like quality to it, which also facilitates the flow aspect of some of those classes too.
Yeah. and it facilitates the spiritual aspect of it too, because it takes you in, but then it also takes you someplace else. And then, like you said, it gives you something to hold on to. Yeah, it does like really help you root. And it's interesting you say that about the heartbeat. That's the way that I have always described your playing. It is just that it's like a heartbeat, and it's something that we always feel drums like through our whole body. But there's really something special about the way that you play, and I always just loved playing with you, and always have wanted to record an album of that music, like for
Yeah.
practicing yoga. So I still want to make that happen. Um, we did some live performing. We played in some bars. We played some
Yeah.
private shows. You did some backup singing with me at some point too. That was super
Yep.
cool. So it's just
And
it's
when
really
Jamie's talking about bars, we're not talking about doing yoga in bars. So that could be interesting.
cool.
She's talking more about playing live music shows in bars. You have
Yeah,
people doing
I got
yoga
him.
on top of the bar,
Yeah,
Warrior Two or whatever,
yeah,
Ardachandrasana.
that's true. Yeah, I got him to come in and play, for some of my music, because
Yeah.
my music is so ethereal, and it's it really brings something to it to like have like an awesome anchoring drum beat. It just really does. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work as a poet? You could say as much as little as you like, but why don't you just kind of tell our listeners about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Well, Rich Ferguson. I I'm, I've always had an interest in writing and performing going back many years, actually, when I was a kid. And back on the East Coast in New Jersey, North Carolina, grew up there. And then after I got out of college, I had been taking drum lessons in New York, and I was just like, I want to go to California. I want to go to California. So I just basically, after college, literally packed my drums in my car and did the whole go west young man thing. And before LA, I ended up in San Francisco for 4 years and, fell into the poetry scene there, and which was amazing, and was also playing in this band called Blue Movie. Reinvented the style of my drumming so that I was playing standing up, because I was doing a lot of lead singing and sometimes doing poetry in between songs. So sitting down to play drums, just like that wasn't going to happen. It just didn't lend itself to that sort of performance. So, it was very dynamic, jumping around, playing drums, doing poetry. And then I eventually came to LA and, continued playing music and also doing poetry. These days, mostly doing poetry, but, there's such a love of music that a lot of the spoken word that I do will involve musical accompaniment or collaboration with musicians. Butch Norton, who plays with drums for Lucinda Williams. He and I have done some videos together, and also a bunch of live events, including speaking of playing drums for yoga, Butch and I have done a lot of drumming for James Morrison's class you mentioned earlier, but also for Joe Cara for his class. And I think we're actually going to do a couple things coming up in June. Now that people are sort of getting out and about, Joe's going to do a couple live classes. So that'll be interesting, actually, playing live music again for yoga after not having done it for well over a year.
Yeah, it's such a great part of the practice as well. It's like, you practice yoga, and so your body has an experience of what all these people are doing while they're practicing, and you're getting some of that, while you're playing also in the class. I don't know if you have that experience, but I do.
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
just totally went through a whole class.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that thing, and I know you've experienced it as a performer or whatever. But yeah, playing drums in the context of a yoga class, it's so much about like not only the energy you put out, but the energy you get back from the people in the class. And it just becomes this circular sort of pattern where they feed off you, you feed off them. And, what we end up playing in the class isn't really like dictated. I mean, maybe once in a while we'll set the mood with a certain drum beat, but a lot of what we play is dictated by the mood in the class. And so, yeah, very circular in that way.
Yeah, we need each other like this. This is, I mean, this is what everybody is like missing so much. I think all of the different types of experiences of, frustration and lack and things like that that people have experienced this past year just really come from simple things of being together and
Yeah.
having our energy like affect each other in the way. I mean, it's interesting what we've all been able to do on Zoom, but there's not going to be anything like being live
Yeah.
with live drums in a live yoga class with
Yeah.
everyone. So,
Yeah. I've been to about two live events here in Los Angeles since things have been getting a little bit more relaxed. There's this dance choreographer here in LA, Rosanna Gamson, whose work I really love. And I've done some performing with her throughout the years. And she had a performance in her backyard she's done a lot of teaching at Cal Arts, and I know you have an association with Cal Arts also. But she had some Cal Arts dancers perform in her backyard, and Paul Outlaw, one of her longtime performers. But it was like that was my first event after having not, and I was so beside myself with joy. It was kind of like, I don't know how to contain myself. It's just like, this is so exciting. And then last weekend, I went to see a buddy of mine, Jay Souza, play some music in a parking lot, in a bar parking lot, which was really cool. So, and I love how people are getting really creative as we sort of slowly come out of this. Like, I'll do an open air performance in my backyard. I'll play music in a bar parking lot.
that's funny. I know Jay Sousa from way back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, you were just talking about, some of the people that you've done some collaborations with. I know that there's a piece that you have a video for, and
Yeah.
I think that would be a good time to just jump in and check that out.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'll just sort of give a little context for it. It's called The Wound Collector, and it was, Butch and I, like I said, Butch Norton and I have done a lot of collaborations, and he and Lucinda's band plays with Dave Sutton, and he plays bass and a number of instruments, but both Dave and Butch play with Lucinda, and Dave and Butch were working on this musical track and asked me if I wanted to put some words to it. And I also ended up creating the video for it, because that's another thing I've been developing I've learned how to sort of make my own videos during this time. So anyway, it's called The Wound Collector, and it was basically a collaboration with the three of us. But yeah, okay, I'm going to share my screen, and here we go.
All right, cool. Mm. Nice job.
Thank you.
That was cool. I didn't know that you had made that video. It's awesome. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one of those things where when we went into quarantine, I quickly realized that all those groovy videos I'd been able to make with, really talented filmmakers, Mark Wilkinson, Chris Burdick, and all these other people, and musicians and everything, it's like, oh my God, I got to figure out how to do this on my own, which has, proven to be actually really good because it kind of forced me to learn how to do a lot of stuff on my own. And I just promptly kind of doing tutorials and promptly started making videos. A couple of them have already been featured in some different film festivals and stuff. So it's like, wow, okay, this is cool. I can do this.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, something I was just so talking about so much last year is like, we just really been given an opportunity. It's like, well, what are you going to do with it? I think a lot of the creative people went into like being more creative. A lot of us have just dove into like, okay, how can I learn? How can I learn more? What else is there? And so, like I'm in school, I'm in music school, and I have to do all of these recordings all of the time. That's how I perform because we can't perform live. And
Right.
so, and it just doesn't really work when you have like a whole group of people on Zoom and you're even trying to perform live. So you have to do your recordings like at home and then send them in, and then we'll all watch, each other's videos and things like that. So it's just the technology, the lighting. I mean, it's still like a work in progress, like getting all the tools to be able to make that happen. But with the age of social media and all of that, it really is necessary for everybody to be able to record themselves and get their art out there. It's be a bit overwhelming also because it's just, it's so huge, but it's also like super empowering. And what major tools, like after
Yeah. Yeah.
ma-
And, I've always been a fan of collaborating with various artists. Poet Milo Martin here in LA. We used to have a performance group, Center of a Dead Star, some years ago. But, during the quarantine and everything, I started getting connected with like people like in other countries, this visual artist and poet, Kathleen Reichelt in Canada, we like started doing some collaborations where she had visual art and I would put poetry with it. And then we would put some of those out online through Artadolia in different places. And then in Sweden, I had this guy, Fredrik Ariarte, approach me and say, hey, you want to do some musical collaborations? I could send you some music. And it's like, I mean, maybe some of those things would have come up if, had we not been through all of this. But it's just interesting how we've been able to, or how I've been able to use this time. And I know other people have too, with just going beyond our, like, it's kind of interesting that the quarantine sort of enforced upon us like sheltering and being stuck inside, but yet there was a part of us that were able to sort of go beyond ourselves and go beyond our limitations and go beyond these walls to, collaborate with these people, in other countries or other states or cities and go beyond ourselves and learn new skills. So it's really interesting how we've had this sort of constriction, but also this outward expansion.
yeah, it is super cool. And just to be able to look back at this time like from the future and being able to be like, wow, look at all that changed and all that happened because of that like time period. um there's a lot, like there's a spectrum, but for the artists, um it's been really cool just the connections and the collaborations and the things that have been created and the way that people have to get creative on their own. And like, okay, how can I, because the artists need to be able to express, that's the thing. And something that I've been hearing lately from one of my teachers, he says about music, he's like, it's not complete until it's heard. So you can hear it and create it and write it, but until it's actually heard and experienced by someone else, it's not complete. And so I think that that's true for like artists and creators, is that they need it to get out.
Yeah. That's, that's interesting you should say that, because I sometimes wonder, like with people who write plays or screenplays, like what if like that doesn't end up getting made? And it, like, some people, I mean, some people will just produce it themselves, and I think that's amazing. But like if you write this screenplay and it doesn't get quote unquote sold, it goes in a drawer, and it's like, I don't know. I sometimes wonder how those types of creators deal with that sort of thing. Like they spend so much time researching and writing, and it's not like, it's not like it's not like a poem or a short story or a novel. You can publish it and people will pick up a book. Ooh, I want to read. I want to read that. I mean, there are some screenplays, obviously, like people are like, I want to read that Sam Shepard screenplay or whatever. But yeah, that's interesting.
I just think I mean, of course, that kind of thing would kept me from ever like getting, handing my music over to anyone else and wanting to get involved with these like, corporations, because I was just, I don't know, I heard so many like nightmare stories from people that I knew. And so that is what happens. I mean, if you're at the position that you're in, this position that you're actually having the opportunity of getting your screenplay or your music or whatever that you've written, like, out there, you've also like given up control.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, obviously, there is something in the creation itself, creating a piece of writing, a screenplay, a play, a novel or poem, a song or whatever. There is a lot to just the fact that you do it and you've done it. And there is a satisfaction to that. But yes, when, like what you were saying, when we get to that communion of like sharing it with others, that is where it really like takes on this whole other meaning. Yeah.
yeah, because I believe that the art, that the songwriting, like all of that, it's part of our own, oftentimes healing experience. It's part of our own like growth, the things that we learn about ourselves. Um, but even as singing, when I talk about, our, this is the instrument and we each have one, and we will make certain sounds. Like I used to just write all of my songs in A minor. We're actually, working with certain sounds that heal our body, or has to do with maybe the type of situation that you're going through, and then these sounds are healing for that for you. Or you just think about like listening to like really aggressive, angry music. I mean, that is like somebody's process, right? That's something that they're processing out. So I do first think that it is for the personal experience of healing and expression, but then it is also made for somebody else. I mean, we've all had experience with music, that hearing those words at that certain time, or hearing just those sounds and that music at certain times, and maybe you're listening to it because it makes you cry, and so
Yeah.
you're listening to it so that you can process. Like, I'm not somebody who cries very easily, and so I have to have some other kind of experience, music, other people's emotions or whatever, to kind of bring that out. And so, it's just interesting, like for somebody's, all their work that they did to like then get shelved. I just can't imagine what a frustrating experience that must be. Like I also think it's different for all artists, right? Like some
Yep.
people, that is their mission, to get that thing out there, to get that movie out there, to get that story, that message. That's part of their purpose and part of the mission. So they're not going to stop
No,
until
of course
it is
not.
out there. Um, and so you probably have that too with like different pieces where you're like, this one, whatever it is, I'm going to get all the other people involved, or I'm going to refine it till it's done, or this has to get out there. And then other pieces that you're like, well, maybe I'll share this at some point, or maybe it's not something that I've ever shared yet. My personal process used to be, I had to perform it. So I would get the song and it would all come through me at once. And then I would have to perform it. And until I performed that piece, I wouldn't get another song. So if I wrote all this music and then held on to it, which I've done before, which happens is like, I get blocked. I just get locked up because there's all of this. And then there's also a requirement for me to record it. So I've also had experiences too with music that I'm like, this isn't what I want to be playing anymore, but it would just not leave me alone until I recorded it. And then it was, once I was recorded it, then it was out. But it just kind of feels like it was in my inbox. Like I will have periods too where I'm just like not playing or I'm not writing, like for whatever reason. I've had that. I've had periods of time where I'm like playing all the time or recording, I'm traveling and playing music, and then I'm having a shutdown and I'm just not even picking up my guitar and I'm not playing. And what's always interesting is when I pick up that guitar again, the same music is like in my inbox, the same things in order of how my guides or spirit or the energies that write through me, the way that they've decided how they want that stuff to roll out, it won't leave me alone. Like I have some songs from 10 years ago or something that I haven't recorded yet. And I have to record them or they are not going to leave me alone.
Why is this song still stalking me?
Well, too, and because it's sometimes too, for me, it's like these super sappy love songs that I just get embarrassed about that kind of stuff. Like I've written and recorded a lot of that, but I'll just get embarrassed about it and I don't want to. And they're like, well, it's still right here and you don't get to get past it until you're past it. So you need to finish. And then the day comes that, that's just like, that's someone's favorite song. It's the song that why they love your music or what has had an impact. Then you're like, okay, well, I get it. It's not just always about me. And when I was younger, those ideas kind of kept me from performing because I was like, it's just for me. My voice is just for me. The music's just for me. It's not, I don't want to be on show. Like I'm not a performer. This isn't like, I looked at it wrong. And so the way that I looked at it caused insecurity for me, as opposed to in this place now where I'm really driven by what it is that I need to be offering, to the point where I'm like, I need to refine my skills so that what it is that I'm putting out is really doing its job.
Yeah.
How is the process for you, for your writing?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I went through, I've written song lyrics. And then poetry was kind of a natural extension of that. And at a certain point in my writing, some years back, I was like, I want to write a novel. And it was kind of like one of those things you were talking about. It was like that bug in your ear. And I was like, I feel like I need to do this. And I took different attempts at it. I tried approaching it from different ways. Because I have some friends that are really talented novelists, and are published and da-da-da-da. And I was like, I want to be a member of that club. Mm-hmm. And it just, I kept at it. And I just was like, I just was really bad at, and I was like, I would try to write a novel and I would look at it and I read books on writing novels. And I was just like, at a certain point, I just got to write this novel and stop reading books about writing novels. But it took some years, and there were a number of times during that trajectory where I could have just walked away from it and said, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. But, it would be that thing like knock, 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 knock. It's the novel again saying, you've got to finish me. And, by hook or crook, I eventually got it done. And actually, even got it published. Tyson Cornell Rare Bird Books here in LA published it. But it's like, and now that it's out in the world, I don't really feel that gnawing, like you have to write another novel. I mean, maybe someday, but it was kind of like what you were talking about. It was like, it was sitting in my inbox. That idea was sitting in my inbox for years, and it just, it's out. It's out in the world. It's out of the inbox. I cleared it, and we'll see. With, just poetry, some things come to me naturally. Some things will come to me as whole poems. Others will come to me in parts, sometimes lines, sometimes words, and it will take me. And I'm constantly writing in my journal, and sometimes it will take me looking in the journal and kind of tracking certain thoughts from a period of time, and like, how do these thoughts trace together? Obviously, I wrote them down, so there is some sort of through line, but was I sort of writing a poem, with these bits and pieces? Was I actually writing a longer poem? Let me go back and see. And so I've written poems that way as well, where I just sort of cobble together different ideas and like, I know these relate in some way. So it's almost like a puzzle. It's like you're putting together this puzzle or this mystery of your thoughts and just like connecting them. It's like, I know I was trying to say something here. Let me go back and see, and see what I was trying to say. But yeah, some just come out naturally. Some come out so fast that I'm almost surprised how fast that my hand can, it's doing all it can to keep up with the thoughts. And I'm literally doing all I can to kind of keep up with my thoughts and just whoosh, get them all out at once.
So you're hearing it and then you're writing it, and you're hearing it, that way.
Yeah. Some of them that really come on. It's just, I'm hearing it and I'm just literally being that scribe and, the muse's scribe, so to say, and just writing it down. Mm-hmm. And then, thank you very much.
Have you ever done any of that live, like when you're on the mic?
Like sort of, kind of, just freestyle?
Like a riffing, yeah.
A little bit. I think I've seen some people that are really good at that. Yeah. I'm a better kind of freestyle drummer. Like when I play, because when we play in yoga classes, it's all just inspiration of the moment. With poetry, I like to have sort of a little bit of a foundation, because I've seen people who do it so well. It's just like, I don't even want to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we all have our gifts in different areas. Like there might be something about the writing. So that's how you're receiving the channel. It's how it's coming out. I can't write mine. I have to have the guitar, and it comes from me. The songs usually come from like me just playing the guitar, and then it's like I start to hear stuff.
Yeah.
And it just, and then it will all kind of come out. But I can't do my words, like sit down and write out my words for it. It all comes out. And so I'll be singing. Like I might get on the mic at home and turn on my reverb, because that sound, like the way that I hear my voice through that, it actually helps it to sound like it's less like my own voice. So I can actually hear, I'll put these sounds out there, like, how I do that, like kind of just like ethereal. And I'll just like stretch the voice, almost just like finding the different sounds, and it'll kind of find, or I'll hear it when I hit it, but I have to do it. And that's one of the things about me, though I've never done things live, like totally live. Well, that's not true with that vocal stuff that I'm talking about, but never like, spoken word or poetry, like live like that. But, I do things like, I am someone where the information comes out live. Yeah. Like I have to just let my mouth open, and then, the information come out. So what, and I do readings for people. That's part of that experience too, is that I'm not thinking about it or writing any of it down. And I do have friends that do readings for people where they write it down. They need to go sit in the other room, and then they're receiving messages from their angels or their guides or whoever they're connecting with, and then they can sit down and write that information out and write that message out for someone. Where for me, it just has to happen like in the moment, and I have to just speak it.
Yeah.
So,
I like my process, like once I've written a poem and if I feel like this is one that I want to perform, I go through a whole memorization process, and that's a big process for me. Like after I've written something and after I decide like this is something that I feel will translate in a live situation, I'll, basically chunk. If it's a longer poem, I'll chunk it. I'll sort of memorize different sections at a time. I usually like to do it like I can't just sit down and memorize. I have to be active, either going for a walk or something. And I kind of like to store certain passages in certain places in my body, or assign a certain physical gesture to a part of the poem, because there's that whole thing about muscle memory. So if I do a certain hand gesture, it will trigger the muscle memory, which calls upon that section of the poem, and then I can assign different sections of the poem a certain place in my body, or give it a certain gesture, so that I can literally, when I do something, it calls forth and launches me into that next section of the poem.
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm realizing that I'm very physical in the way that I learn also. So going back to school and just being in all these music classes, and then I was studying psychology at the same time, and I was able to observe the way in which I learned differently from just reading this psychological text and trying to cram into my brain different terms. I'm like, I'm studying this stuff kind of, for the first time. And it's like in the first couple weeks, I'm memorizing, like all these terms. I'm like, but there's no place in my body. There's no experience of any of this being real. But then when I'm learning piano, so even if I'm learning theory, which is very conceptual and it's not physical, but you can take the theory over to the piano and touch it. And when I was able to have that experience and like moving through it and then creating sound through it, just the difference in which I retained the information and that I understood the information.
Yeah.
So that's totally like what you're talking about. That's some good.
Yeah. Part of the reason I brought that up was because you were talking about like, oh, do you ever do spontaneous poetry on the spot or whatever? There will be times where, after I've performed a piece, I will have people come up to me sometimes and they'll be like, were you just like reciting that off the top of your head? And it's like, no, actually, I really had to go through a long process. But to me, when they say that, like, were you just doing that off the top of your head? That's a really great compliment to me, because it shows that like that poem really lives in my body, that I have been able to assign that poem, to certain places in my body, and it lives within me, and that when it comes out, it's natural and it's an extension of myself, to the point where some things, do sound like that I was just doing it on the fly.
Well, I'm going to totally put you on the spot now. Would you like to do something for us live?
Yeah. Sure.
We would love to, see it and hear it.
Yeah. Though I will have to admit to the audience that I am going to have to look at this one a little bit. Being away from live performance, I've gotten a little rusty on some of my live stuff, but I've realized lately that I need to start working go to the gym of like rememorizing my work, because it won't be too long, hopefully, before we're out there again. But this is for my daughter, actually. This was one of the very first poems I wrote for her. And it's called Things About Myself and the World That I Will and Won't Explain to My Now 4-year-old Daughter when she's older. First, drugs. I'll definitely discuss drugs, but I probably won't mention the time I snorted heroin in a dingy MacArthur Park hotel room, or the times I tripped on mushrooms, mescaline, ecstasy, LSD, laughing my ass off, witnessing the walls and people's faces melting, time traveling, telepathically communicating with animals, insects, trees. What I will explain to my daughter is how drugs can be both dangerous and alluring, how one can get so easily hooked on the rush, the giddiness, the floating away, how there are days when all of us, all we want to do is float away. I'll teach my daughter how things like art, music, poetry, and dance can offer a much purer sense of floating away. I'll explain how poetry has so greatly informed my life. That said, I probably won't mention the time I was scheduled to do a featured reading, yet wound up in the hospital that day. Won't reveal how, when I realized I'd be in the hospital much longer than I had expected, yanked the IV from my arm when the nurse wasn't around, scrambled into my clothes, seized a cotton ball to clot the unnerving pulse of my blood, spraying the wall, snuck out of the hospital, hailed a taxi, sped off to my feature, and rocked it. I'll teach my daughter the importance of empathy, compassion, consideration. That said, I probably won't mention the time I was blind drunk at my brother's wedding, skied naked, received a summons from the Wisconsin Water Police, even after I had slurringly tried convincing them that if they didn't ticket me, I would take them back to LA, make them big TV stars, a river version of Chips. I'll figure out how to describe to my daughter the utter remorse and humiliation I experienced as a teenager upon being nabbed by store security in a Kmart parking lot after I had shoplifted the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever. I didn't even want the damn cassette. All I'd wanted was for my parents to stop fighting and not get divorced. I'll do my best to prepare my daughter for ages 13 through 19, how those years will be one great big life-affirming, soul-crushing rush of proms, relationships, acne, breakups, and all the rest. I may even find the appropriate moment to offer a cautionary tale or two, how my dumbass teenage buddies and I would drive drunk, spin donuts on people's pristine lawns, jam potatoes in car tailpipes, steal road signs, all because we had no idea how to express our reckless, random, hormone-fueled emotions any other way. Then I'll play for my daughter The Who's Bob O'Reilly. We'll dance through the house, celebrating and commiserating in the joys and sorrows of those coming years, loudly singing as The Who wails, Teenage Wasteland. It's only Teenage Wasteland. I'll teach my daughter the importance of honesty, justice, determination. I will support her in maintaining a positive body image. I will confess how in high school I used an ice cube and Zippo heated dirty sewing needle to pierce my ear, how it became an infected, swollen mess, suffered through shots and antibiotics for well over a week, all for the sake of wanting to fit in because my dumbass buddies kept telling me I would look much cooler if my ear were pierced. I'll point out to my daughter the importance of never letting anyone, including herself, bend up her aura, reshape her inner light into an unflattering shine, how certain mistakes can never be completely undone, but in the best possible circumstances, their DNA can be altered to embody subtle forms of forgiveness and grace, how our every breath and heartbeat have the potential to compose verses on air, sonnets of love when it's freshly baked, glorious stories of coyote-blooded magic, sending us roaming wild-toothed and full-moon-footed into the dense forests of the absolutely alive. I will warn my daughter that this is a world where people can hurt and heal. There exists the goodness of strangers and the absolute cruelty of those we've considered friends. How the bitterness and anger we sometimes experience is no city for permanent refuge. In the face of it all, I will teach my daughter to wear her name proudly. Let it be a cradled murmur in the ear, bubble and luck, and Attila the Hun of fun, a get out of jail free card, and her own star on Hollywood Boulevard. May the mere mention of my daughter's name be a cathedral of sweet talk, hummingbird flutter, and on her most troubled days, may my daughter's name be the tears that travel in reverse to unstain her cheeks and brighten her sad, sad eyes. For Evelyn, everything.
This is awesome. Yes.
It's so good to hear you clapping on Zoom, because usually it's like these, like, you know, all those, like, yeah, everyone's mic is off and they're doing the jazz hands.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's so exciting and exhilarating. I love the way that it moves, and then so many interesting things that you're saying in there. You know, it's like the mind to follow you is it's a ride. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's super cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was fun to write it. It was a ride. It was a journey.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, how long does it take you to write something like that?
Oh, there were once I kind of had it in my mind that I wanted to write a poem for her, like an instruction manual of sorts, so to say. It came out, for the length that it came out pretty easily. It really became, I think there was more involved with the editing of the piece, because I was just churning out so many ideas that I then had to, like, look back on it and say, okay, like, whoa, boy, okay, let's put this in a form that's, you know, that's manageable and makes sense. But that would be one where, like, once I had it locked and loaded, it just came out. And then, as I'm sure you know, with your own songwriting and everything, there is, you know, the revision process, really, which is well, with making films, with really doing a lot of creative works, that there's that revision process, which is really, for me, a really important process. And you know, it can be, the revision process can be like very light strokes of the editing brush, but other times where it's like, this is going to take a lot of work, but that's cool too. I enjoy doing that.
Thank you so much for doing that. It was so cool to hear here. I'm sure, you know, for everyone else listening at home. What is your dream? What do you want to, how do you want, so I'll say it this way, like, as a musician, I don't care to have my music on the radio. That's not the kind of music I write, and that's not, you know, that's not my dream. I don't really care. But I want to be in a movie theater watching something like Braveheart, Lord of the Rings, Gladiator, something like that. And then I want to hear my music, whether it's during the movie, whether it's the credits after, like, that's where I want to experience my music. And it's where I want to hear it. That's where I want, so do you have something like that for you, for your expression? Like,
yeah, I do. I would like to, I mean, I've had songs, like when I was in bands, I've had songs played on the radio and different things. And that's amazing. I love all that stuff. You know, I've got now 2 books of poetry in print, and that novel. I think, like, one of the things that I think about, like, I would love to have some sort of production where I was being backed by, like, I don't want to say an orchestra, like the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, you know, I mean, but just like, I would like some sort of grand experience where I could, like, have this really lush soundscape where I would be performing spoken word, and maybe even some dancers or some sort of movement, just making it a really sort of fleshed out live experience with different elements. And that's what I would really love. And of course, with a live audience attending.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds cool. I can see that. I can totally see that.
Yeah.
I want that too. Like that thing about going to Cal Arts and working with all of these artists. I mean, that's the whole dream of to go there, is to have so many artists to work with, and that the school, it's part of their focus is collaboration. And years ago I had written this piece. It just had with all these love songs that went together, and there's kind of this story of fairy and vampire, and I was into all this, fairy folklore and stuff like that years ago. And I wanted to be able to perform this on stage and have dancers and have other people, always be playing the music. And so sometimes actually be the character, but a lot of the other times be in the dark, like be in the forest and have these other people playing out the story. So yeah, I totally get that. And there's nothing like music and movement to be able to support the message and the feeling, right?
Yeah.
It helps to like create the feeling. So
yeah. And also when I perform with musicians, I feel that, and I love performing solo. I love just, getting on a mic and just rocking solo, just my voice. And there are times and places for that. But when I'm like performing with like really sensitive musicians that are listening to me and I'm listening to them, that really takes me places, and it really brings out parts of my voice and parts of my performance that I don't really know if would express themselves in such a way were I just performing solo. So I am such a fan of collaborating with others, because it really does bring out parts of me that I don't know if would be so easily accessible if I were just performing myself. I mean, they're obviously within because they're being called forth, but it does seem that like when I perform with musicians, my voice goes to different places than it does when I perform by myself.
Of course, I totally get that.
Yeah.
It's not really fun for me to be a solo performer, and I've done it, especially going on tour in England and stuff. That was the only way that it was going to happen. But there is something about that interaction with others and creating it with others. It becomes something that you're inside of, and that you're part of.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Like there was this band I was in here in LA some years ago called Bloom, and like when we had this really massive sound, like with this, and part of the signature sound was this dear friend of mine who's passed away, Jet Soto. He played this lap steel guitar that would just soar above all the other instruments, the drums, the guitar, the bass. And there were times where and I'd be playing the drums and singing, and there were times where when everything was going right, it's exactly what you were just saying. It was like I wasn't outside it, I was in it. I was no longer like just myself playing drums or singing. Like I was part of the sound. I was inside the sound, and I was a part of the sound. But yeah, oh man, that's such a great feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we can explain it in words, but, and people will be like, okay, that's kind of cool, listening. But it's kind of one of those things like you sort of have to experience to really like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I've been there before. I know that feeling. And it can come with other things too that you're doing, just, being in that zone or whatever, doing yoga or whatever, doing anything where you're just so in that space. It's like, you're just that thing. You are inside that thing. You are that thing.
Well, it really helps the be here now process, right? It's those kinds of situations that cause you to just be right here inside of this moment. And so you're not projecting and thinking about before and after, and you're really just able to just be in it and be moving authentically inside of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the best.
Yeah, you're not thinking like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to swing by the Carl's Jr. drive-thru on my way home from band rehearsal.
That's bad. If you're thinking about that, you know that you're really in the wrong.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, yeah. Or like, yeah, I should have like called that person before rehearsal. No, yeah, but of course, yeah, when you're in it, and that's it. But that whole, be here now, present moment, it's amazing. No matter what you're doing. It's just that feeling is the best.
That's what our breath helps us with. There's just been a lot of conversation lately around breathing through your nose. And there's something
Which is
about,
hard to do with a mask on.
well, it
Yeah.
is hard to do with a mask on.
Yeah.
And I think with all the mask wearing, something that people don't talk about, because there's all this conversation around what everybody should be doing and what other people aren't doing and all of
Yep.
that, is that if you are somebody who is wearing a mask all the time, it is 100% your responsibility to make sure that you go get in places where you can breathe without that on.
Yep.
And so you need to be taking breaks. You need to be doing that a couple times an hour. Like, I'm just, really interested to hear about all the health problems and things like that are going to come out from this just really long period of time of people, having to breathe with the mask on. And there's reasons why we have to wear the mask in certain places. But
absolutely,
when you're in your car driving by yourself, or if you, like I said, you need to take breaks and you need to go where you can go outside so that you can breathe.
Yeah. Or even just the whole PTSD of just having been quarantined for a year or something, just as we start to reemerge. Like, I mentioned earlier that I'd gone to a couple live performances. It felt, the first one I went to, that outdoor dance show, as excited as I was extremely nervous. I mean, and not because I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to get sick. It was more just like, I don't know how to behave. And I mean, I do know how to behave in public, but I just felt like, it's so weird being around people again.
Yeah, I know. So I think that, the reverse of that is just like everyone, people just like so appreciate each other.
Yeah.
People appreciate being together and all of us being able to be together, and what happens to us individually when we are all together energetically. And, we need each other. And part of our experience here on this planet is being here together.
Yep.
And we live in this city here in Los Angeles where there is so much separateness. This is kind of way of life here. A lot of people move here without families. People come here alone. People are on their like solo mission all the time. This isn't like a very communal, even though you can find communities in certain places. It's just different. Like, you go to Portland, Oregon. I went there and lived there for like a year, and it's entirely different. It's just so communal. Everybody's like with each other all the time. And here it's different. It's like you are on your solo mission, and then you can choose to go here and here and here and here and here and plug into these different environments or people. But there's so much that we do on our own. There's so much that we're refining with our art and our craft, that we're working on those things alone, so that then we can bring it, to a place where we can show it and share it. But I think for here, for sure, just we've all really like had such a realization that it's better to be together. And there's something about when we're all together and we're all in the room together and we're playing music together and, performing and listening crowd, all of that is together. It doesn't work the same if part of it isn't there.
Yeah. And I think there's going to be, and it's kind of obvious, but it's going to be really interesting to see. I think there's going to really be a greater appreciation for those when people can, reemerge and take part in these events, going to see music, and it feels safe and everything. It's going to feel, it's going to be like this rebirth. And I really am excited to see how that plays out. And I think people will have a greater appreciation for being a performer or being an audience member. It's going to be really great to see how that unfolds for everyone.
Yeah, I'm excited to be there for it. Well, thank you so much for coming here. And
thank you, Jaime. And thank you for those of you out there listening, watching. I hope you all are well.
And I have put all of the ways that you can contact Rich in the show notes. So if you're listening, it's going to be in the show notes for the podcast. But if you're on any of the videos, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, it's going to be down below the video. And maybe I'll get some links from you for your book and some of those things, so people can just click right on that. And
great.
You told us about your novel, but you didn't tell us about what your novel is about.
Well, it's called New Jersey Me, and it's At its simplest, it's sort of a coming of age story about a guy, not much unlike my experience there, growing up in a backwards South Jersey town and wanting to get out. But this character just literally from the womb realized he was doomed to this town and would just, needed to get out. But it's much more than that, too. But that's sort of what it's about at its heart, coming of age story. And we've all been there, getting out of those places where it's just like, if I stay here, I'm doomed. I got to get out.
And is there poetry? Do you write it
Well, it's interesting that you should say poetry because I had this amazing editor, Seth Fisher, who Tyson Cornell paired me up with. And, it's pretty much in chapter form novel. And at one point I was just like, I need to interject some poetry in here. And I just had one chapter where it's literally like a spoken word rant. And I figured out a way to place it within the context of the novel, but I just felt like, I need to do this. And then I sent it to my editor. I sent it to Seth, and I was like, I have no idea how he's going to probably say, yeah, scrap it or whatever. He wrote back. He was like, I love this. I was like, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that felt really good. It was like, whew, I can get some poetry in there.
Yeah. Right on. I'd love to read how that comes out.
Yeah.
So I'll not ask you about it and have you give it away, but I'd love to read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you for coming here and sharing with us and doing poetry for us.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's great as always to connect with you, Jamie. And I look forward to hearing about your experiences as Cal Arts and seeing how you grow and all the great things that come out of that experience. And I am proud of you. I'm really proud of you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited about that. I'm excited about the ability that's going to give me to be able to create more. And like we were saying, even, get some of my own stuff recorded and just more tools. Cause I have a lot to express and I can do it in all the ways that I know how, but not in the other ways that I don't know how. So, I'm going to find more people to play with and people to collaborate with. It's just like an entire school full of people that are just only artists, dancers, musicians, filmmakers, animators. I just feel like a kid in a candy store. I'm just like, what? What am I getting to do? So, I'll definitely keep you in the loop about what's going on. And I can't wait to play with you again. And would love to do that album. Would really just love to do that album and have that out there for people for meditation and for their yoga practice. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. Well, have a good night.
You too.
Keep doing it. We want to see you performing on the stage like that with all those dancers and musicians behind you. I'm holding that vision for you.
That sounds great. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.
And everyone else, everyone out there, take good care.
Yep. Thanks for watching. I'm Jaime Black. You can go to jamieblack.com to see, to read more about me and any of my offerings. You can go listen to the podcast on Spotify, on iTunes. It's called Silverlake Priestess. All of this season 2 is just right here on YouTube, and that'll be on the podcast in the future. But thank you for watching. Please share with your friends, like this interview, and subscribe to the channel. And with all of that, I hope you all have a nice week. I'll see you next Sunday, and blessed be.